computer. We good? Looks like we're good. All right, hello, baseball fans, and welcome to another episode of Roundtrippers. This is also apparently going to double as a podcast for Dong City. I got the host of Dong City with me. I've got Henry Maldonado Jr. and Vince Mercandetti with me as special guests. Thank you both for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Thank you for having us, brother.
All right. So a few weeks ago, I had Felipe from the Total Bases podcast from the Baseball Life group. Dong City is the other podcast, and Henry and Vince both are the hosts of that. And they spent a lot of time talking about the Yankees because they are both Yankee fans, and they've had quite a bit to say this season about Aaron Boone. I haven't told them this yet, but I like to refer to them as like the Boone Bash brothers because they do a lot with they just bash Aaron Boone a lot. So, I mean, can we just officially coin that now? You guys are the Boone Bash brothers, or?
I'm good with that. Yeah,
I'm perfectly okay with it.
We're like the Boone S&M M&M brothers too.
Oh, there you go. That works too.
Yeah. You can just say the SMD brothers.
That too. Yeah, a lot of acronyms going on.
I know.
No, I'm absolutely fine with that. We are not friendly to Aaron Boone, that's for sure.
Oh, you are not.
We are pretty straightforward Yankee fans. If we don't like something, we say it.
And that's
we don't do the
like.
homer thing too much. Yeah.
No, that's what I like. So, and you'll catch them a lot if you go on to the Baseball Life group. You'll see them talk about the Yankees a lot, along with other teams. But you will see a lot of Vince's and Henry's posts be about the Yankees and how just boneheaded some of the decisions from Aaron Boone are. So, while we are talking about the Yankees, we might as well just get right into it. Both of you, we were planning on both of you talking about the Yankees. Just what are your general feelings about the Yankees, especially after getting their beef boys, Anthony Rendon and Joey Gallo from the trade deadline, and just anything else you guys feel about talking about the Yankees at this point. So go ahead. Let's start with Vince. What's your take on the Yankees right now?
Right now things are looking a lot better, and it's this is very Yankee-like. Anthony Rizzo, the big trade acquisition, and he goes down, I don't know, like 2 weeks later. But they're winning anyway. I mean, this is what the Yankees have been since really the beginning of 2019. Nothing makes sense. Everything is completely inconsistent. But right now we're on an upswing. They've won, I think, 9 out of 10 series now. They've beaten the White Sox and Rays and Astros in that span. So, I mean, these aren't just beating up on a soft schedule, leading the Angels right now. It's tough, Austin. It really is. It's tough to stay objective. It's tough to analyze anything. The team just really doesn't make a lot of sense a lot of the time. And this year, I think Henry has been the most extreme example of that. This team looked like one of the worst in baseball in April and May. It could not hit. No one in the lineup could hit. Even the guys, you look at the back of their baseball card, they're supposed to be carrying the lineup. They weren't hitting. And you look up now, it's mid-August. They're right in the thick of things. They seem to just be winning consistently, regardless of opponent, regardless of lineup, regardless of who's blowing games in the ninth. It's crazy. To answer your question, I mean, this is, I guess, what you sign up for when you become a sports fan. It hasn't really been like that with the Yankees. This is the model of consistency. They're going on their 30th consecutive year of being above 500, which for my money is the most impressive feat in all of sports, regardless of payroll and everything else. But yeah, to answer your question, it's a whirlwind. It's crazy. I really couldn't tell you what to expect, even though I watch this team every single day.
So would you say their inconsistency would probably be their downfall in this playoff push?
I think that, well, they're pretty consistent right now winning-wise. I think if they're going to be doomed, it's just because of you've got the Blue Jays and really the Mariners. I thought they'd fall off by now. They haven't. They just finished beating up on the Blue Jays. You got the Blue Jays and Mariners chasing you. and you're chasing the Red Sox and A's and Rays to a lesser extent. It's just, some of those teams are good and they're not going to make the playoffs, and the Yankees could be that, but you can make an argument they've got the biggest upside of any team that's in that cluster, not counting the Rays because they've got a giant lead, but they've got presumably health coming back. Presumably the injuries are behind you, but you never know that if you're in New York. So it's I would say if they don't make the playoffs, it's going to just be because they've pissed away so many games this year for so many various reasons, whether it's the bullpen, lack of offense, Aaron Boone, whatever you want to say. They've just lost so many games that were easy wins, and every other team in baseball's won those games.
Right.
Yeah, and to piggyback off what Vince is saying, I think we've been spoiled as Yankee fans, and this season is a testament to that. What we're seeing is what most other fans go through, and we don't go through that usually. And we're stuck with the roller coaster ride that is the game. And we've lost games with Aaron Boone making some atrocious calls and moves that we criticize in real time. It's not like we're Monday morning quarterbacking it. You're in the group, you're in the thread, you see us criticizing these moves in real time and saying, hey, you're bringing in a guy who's struggling, or this guy, is hot and you're not playing him. Whatever the case is, we lost maybe 10 games with our bullpen, and blowing leads. I think we have 4 losses this season after a lead in the 8th inning. And I think all of MLB has 4, and we have all 4 of them or something. It's a crazy number. And I still like our chances right now. I'm not worried about Tampa Bay. I'm probably more worried about the Blue Jays than anyone else in the AL East. Tampa Bay just kind of, they feel like they're that Band-Aid that starts to come off when you wet it. And, it's barely holding on right now. They're about to sign
Dave Robertson.
Jesus. Yeah. No, who was it?
Dave Robertson?
They weren't thinking. Oh no, that was the Padres. I'm thinking of Padres. I'm sorry.
You're thinking of Jake Arrieta.
Arrieta. But yeah, they're signing Dave Roberts, which is a desperate move. I mean, with the guys that the Rays pull out of their minor league system, you're telling me there's not someone better than Dave Roberts that they can go to, on the cheap and just call up. So it's just a move of desperation to me. I'm not afraid of the Rays. I'm not afraid of the Red Sox, even though they've owned us this year. I think where the Red Sox are on the trajectory and where we are, we're just on different planes, and we're playing much better baseball than they are right now. It's us in Toronto in my eyes right now, and the AL West, the race is getting tighter, and Oakland, they don't want to stop losing. They cut that Astros lead, and then they slump a little, and then they seem to be in that 1 to 2 game back range. So it's going to be interesting, but I like the Yankees' chances here.
Yeah, especially with the AL East counterparts there on the Yankee side. Like you were saying, the Red Sox are not really doing well right now. They're tanking, and the Blue Jays just got beat up by the Mariners. And the best team right now in that AL East is looking like the Yankees. So it'll be a really, really tight race. Coming down to the end here at the playoff push. What do you guys feel about the future down there in the farm system? I know you guys have been looking at the farm system for the
I love our farm. I mean, Vince and I are both really high on our farm. We're probably high on some guys that, aren't the household names that probably are the Yankees. Everyone knows about Jason Dominguez and some of the other guys, but I mean, we're loaded. We just gave up Duran in the trade for Gallo, which probably hurt more than any other trade we made, and he wasn't a top 15 prospect. So I'm kind of happy we reloaded. We put some guys in our lineup that we desperately need, and we barely gave up anything of significance in our farm. We're strong up the middle and in the infield. We have some young guns coming. Luis Hill we knew he was a big arm, but his first 2 starts have been absolutely amazing. There's no reason that we should see Andrew Heaney anymore, but I believe he's getting the start soon. So I like what we have coming up for reinforcements within the next few years.
Yeah, as an Angels fan, I'd like to say Andrew Heaney is your problem now.
Yeah, that's an understatement. He's like watching oh god, I'm blanking on his name. You remember Chase Whitley? He's like watching Chase Whitley over and over again.
God.
Just he's the pitcher who went into Fenway Park, gave up 4 home runs in a row, lost that game, and he was never seen again.
You know what's frustrating about Heaney, at least in the 3 starts with the Yankees, it's like one bad inning, and then he's like, okay, he's figured it out, and then there's the bad inning again, then he's good, and then there's the bad, and I'm like, just get him the fuck out of here.
Yeah, that was the problem when he was on the Angels too. He was very inconsistent, and he'd have that 1 or 2 bad innings, and then he'd figure it out later in the game, and you're like, where was that in the first and second inning? And sometimes it wasn't even in the first and second inning. He'd have a bad second inning, and then he'd have a bad 5th inning, and you're like, dude, what the heck? There's just this consistency is not there.
It blows my mind, baseball as a sport. You can look at a guy like Andrew Heaney. If you watch Andrew Heaney pitch, to me, he's got 3 out pitches. I mean, his stuff is good. Mm-hmm. His command is so bad sometimes that literally every mistake he makes is hit at least 350 feet. That annoys me. That triggers me way more as an avid baseball fan than anything else. Because then you look at a guy like Nestor Cortez, right? He just pitched yesterday for the Yankees against the White Sox. That guy does not throw more than 90 miles per hour. In modern baseball, that is very slow. He's got no out pitches in my mind, but he'll paint every single corner there is. He'll make up corners to paint. He's got 4 different arm slots. He changes the timing of his delivery. He's as crafty as it gets, and he gets major league outs. You just look at the dearth of talent between those 2 guys. Really, that's something that baseball has. I don't think you see a lot in other sports. You're not going to see a quarterback in football who can't throw, who's going to be a good quarterback, or a guy who could throw it, 80 yards downfield and is a terrible quarterback. I mean, it happens a little bit, but that's really what I look at. Haney's one of those guys. James Paxton was the same way. We just saw him, who, for whatever reason, when things get bad, he can't get back on the tracks. But then you see 4 dominant innings out of him afterwards, and you're like, what the hell? We're down 4 runs because of that inning, and now all of a sudden he's eating innings. And you look at it and you're like, all right, is he going to be good next start? Like, he finished strong, and it's the same thing over and over again. So he's very frustrating to watch. To answer your question about
the same problem. We had the same opinion.
Yeah, that's probably who he is. It's a dime a dozen. You see plenty of guys who have good stuff, and maybe the stuff is not up there that's good, or maybe they just have command or control issues. But to answer your system, to answer your question, the Yankees farm system is really intriguing to me because it's deep, and that's not the same as highly ranked. That's not the same as has a bunch of superstars in it, but it's deep. And when you're a contender every year, like the Yankees have been, they're in this World Series window, right? At least through next year. That to me is the most important thing. Like, that to me is how teams like the Cardinals stay afloat every year. It's not having 8 top 100 prospects. You're not going to have that unless you've been shitty at some point. The Padres had it. They were bad for a while. The Rays, obviously, they're maybe an exception to the rule, but everyone else, like the White Sox, were terrible for a while. They had this great farm system. Yankees might only have a few guys who are top 100, but they have a lot of guys who can contribute at the major league level. And this year in particular, you're seeing that example. We gave away, I think, 8 Rule 5 eligible guys at the deadline for 3 trades, and they still have 2 or 3 more they have to protect. And you still have a farm system that I think, personally, when you look up opening day next year, they're going to have at least 5 top 100 prospects. Yeah. So it's a deep farm system. I know Yankee prospects can be overhyped, and Henry and I are usually the first ones to underhype them. We'll put guys like I never liked guys like Florial or Frazier, and I was the first one to say it. But it works both ways. You also get these guys like Anthony Volpe was shit on when he was drafted. Me included. I thought he was a toolsy shortstop, a Brendan Ryan type. You can a dime a dozen, and he's not. He's turned into a potential 5-tool guy. So it goes both ways. But right now, the Yankee farm system looks deep. Maybe it's not elite, but it is deep, and that could be dangerous when you're a playoff contender.
Yeah, and that's one thing I thought was really good about Brian Cashman was they got all of these. They got Anthony Rizzo. They got Joey Gallo. They got some of these bigger hitters, and they didn't give up their top prospects for it, which I thought was really well done. And they gave up some of these, these relievers that weren't necessarily high cost, or they weren't vital to their bullpen, but it made room for other people that they wanted to keep. So I thought it was a very good trade deadline by Brian Cashman.
I liked it. I like the Heaney pickup. I like the Heaney pickup because I think he can be fixed with one simple move, and that's moving him to the bullpen.
Yeah.
He relies on 3 pitches, his curveball, his changeup, and his fastball. And you look at his analytics, and I know Vince hates pitching analytics, but, there are things in there that you can look at that say this guy's got something. Andrew Heaney's whiff percentage, his fastball rate, his curveball spin, his chase rate are all above major league average. So to me, put him in the pen, eliminate one of those 3 pitches, and you make him a 2-pitch pitcher, and you probably have something there.
Yeah.
8 seasons in the major leagues, he hasn't put it together as a consistent starter. I'd say try him as a reliever and see what you get there.
Right. Yeah.
I agree with that, probably for different reasons. I'm going to sound like a dinosaur here, but you can watch Andrew Heaney and you can say, he consolidates his repertoire. He could be a pretty dangerous reliever. So, that, like I said, I think he's got 3 major league pitches in shorter sample sizes. You limit it to 2 and maybe you bust the 3rd one out in desperation. That could be a weapon. And I think absolutely he'd be in the playoff. If he was in a playoff situation, coming out of the bullpen as a lefty, big spot. Maybe it's a different story. Yankees have about 4 of those guys right now in the bullpen. They have probably more lefty relievers than anyone in baseball, if I had to guess. But that is one thing Cashman is good at. He can identify raw talent. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I'd rather him do that. A guy like Holmes too, right? That was another trade acquisition right before the deadline. They acquire the reliever Holmes. At the time you look at it, the dude's got a 5 ERA on the Pirates in the NL Central. You're like, this guy sucks. They gave up Luis Sessa. You're like, what the hell?
I was. What did I say?
From day one, yes.
Yeah, I like the Clayton.
From day one, Henry looks at his game log. He said, you know what? One really, really bad start. He gave up 6 runs or whatever in one outing. Deceiving. And he said, you look at his stuff and it's really good. And I had never seen him pitch. I saw him pitch and I agree. I mean, he's got legitimate stuff. That's really what I go based on. Cashman's good at that sort of stuff. And that's really what keeps the team above 500 all this time. Even in 2013, 2014, they didn't have a lot of talent. They didn't have a lot of young guys. But they still were able to kind of find these pieces that contribute in some way. And right now he's got to find 2nd and 3rd and 4th string pieces that contribute in some way. And he's doing it. So, that's the comfort part of Brian Cashman.
Yeah. Well, that's because they've lived in the next man up mentality for the last, 3 years now. They've had so many people on the IL. I mean, the Angels have the same problem too, but so we feel your pain, but it seems like the next man up mentality has been that way for 3 years now.
You know what hurts us big time? That a lot of fans, a lot of Yankee fans, because we're Vince and I are in a couple of Yankee groups, and Yankee fans are insufferable. Some of these guys are fucking insufferable. And you have a guy that's doing good in the minor leagues, and right away bring him up, and sometimes you want to bring him up, but we have 40-man roster problems. You have guys that, we have under 40 that if we lose, they go to other teams. They can become something. And so, you're always playing chess with the 40-man roster. And some of these guys just aren't on the 40. And you can't just bring them up that way. Sometimes you DFA the wrong guys like we did earlier this season. And, for a while we said we would have rather DFA Tyler Wade. And Tyler Wade has been quietly carrying the Yankees for 2 weeks. So sometimes you just got to be patient and let these things play out.
Right. All right, so that was a lot of information on the Yankees, and I knew you guys would put a lot of information in there because you guys are very informed fans, Yankee fans. So I really appreciate that. And the Yankees are in the midst of a playoff push, and so what we are going to do is we are going to put together predictions, I guess you want to call it, for this playoff push that's coming up now. I know the playoffs are still a little bit of ways away. We still got a couple months until the playoffs start. But I really think that, we can make assumptions, and we can make that anyway. I'm trying to share my screen here because I've got a. All right, it's not letting me share the screen. So let's see.
It's usually a setting on Zoom.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is.
Yeah, I got to quit and reopen Zoom. So do you guys have the Google Sheet up?
I don't have it up. I could probably get it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I have it up. Hold on. Let me see if I can share.
Okay. Anyway, so we're gonna make some playoff predictions. We're gonna go through each division. We're gonna talk about.
Austin, I'm sorry. You have to enable the group sharing.
Do I? Okay. Let's see.
Should be share, and then it says enable participants.
Enable participants. I don't know where that is. Oh wait.
It's right. It's a little drop-down menu that says share screen. There you go.
Nice.
You guys got it? You guys can see it?
Yep, I can see it fine.
Awesome. Okay, so now I got it up. My technology brain kicked in, and now I figured it out. So it's hard after a long day of work when you've been working on the technology. You go and your brain wants to quit. So like I said, we're going to go through each division, and we're going to talk about each division a little bit. And Henry, Vince, and I are going to predict which people or which teams are going to win each division. And then we are going to pick our wild card winners as well. Let's start with the AL West. So in the AL West, we have Houston leading right now, 2.5 games ahead of Oakland. And then you have Seattle 8 games behind. The Angels are in a distant 12 games behind, which is very disappointing for me. And the Rangers are in the basement at 28.5 games behind. So let's start with Henry. Henry, what do you think of the AL West, and who do you think is going to win it?
I'm going to stick with my preseason prediction here. And I'm not going to do that with everything, but I'm going to stick with my preseason prediction and say Oakland catches Houston.
Okay. So I've got that on there. So you think the Astros are going to falter here at the end there, huh?
Yeah, part of it is I think they slow down a bit, and part of it is hate.
Okay.
Just being honest.
Exactly.
That's good. Oh, I got that on the wrong one. Vince, what do you think of the AL West, and who do you think is going to win?
You know what? I obviously Henry and I did the prediction show. I picked Oakland in the preseason. I'm going to actually stick with Houston, much to my disgust. Only because I feel like Houston has sort of reached that point, sort of like the Dodgers too, where they've been in the thick of things, and they've gotten deep into the playoffs so often and so recently. I think they kind of coast, and that division gets close, and it's like Henry mentioned earlier, division gets close, and then it's like Houston wins 9 out of 10. They take it back a couple games, and like it gets close again. Houston wins 9 out of 10. They take back a couple games. I just don't see that. I don't see a reason to pick against them. Oakland's only 2.5 back. That's by no means insurmountable. They are a team that can get white hot, but I just don't see a reason that they're going to flip-flop. And so I'll go with Houston there. It wouldn't surprise me, obviously, if Oakland did win the division, but I'm going to stick with the Astros. I don't see a reason to pick against them.
I will say Oakland is 2.5 out, and in the last 10 games, they've gained 3 games. So possible.
Yeah. No, they were like 6.5 out. Yeah. I mean, I think at the All-Star break, they were like 6.5 or 7 out. So they're definitely making up ground. It's just, I don't know, they could make up 9 games and then they might lose 5. So it's tough.
Yeah, I've said this on the podcast before the All-Star break, that Houston seemed to have a pretty good control of the AL West. But, yeah, Oakland has been catching up, and I've seen Oakland play, and it's just really Oakland is really interesting because they don't have any lights-out pitchers that, are names that are going to blow you away. But their pitching staff is pretty good. Their offense, they get it done, almost every game. But I just saw Houston, and it's really tough, even though, everybody hates him. Jose Altuve, he seems like he's blocking out all the hate because he's got a high 200 batting average. He's hitting homers. So, and they got the best offense, or one of the best offenses in the MLB. They got I think their downfall is going to be their pitching staff. Their starting pitching, their relief is pretty good, but I think their starting pitching will be a bit of their downfall. But, I'm going to go with Houston as the winner of this division, but I think it's going to be really close. Like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if Oakland overtakes it, and I also wouldn't be that upset if Oakland took it over.
I'm just going to remind you both that Jose Altuve is hitting below his career averages in every statistical offensive category. So I'm just going to remind you of that, like I will remind you about Nolan Arenado.
I'm right there with you. Altuve is better than he was last year. He's getting older. I'll give him that.
Not saying a lot. Look, I did say last year he would have his worst statistical season, and he went out and he did just that.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not that hard to be better than he was last year.
Yeah, he was.
No, I mean, for sure.
He was awful last year. So, all right. Now that we have that, we have 2 for Houston, 1 for Oakland. We're going to move to the AL Central. So in the AL Central, we've got Chicago with a firm lead. They're 10 games ahead of Cleveland. And then there's really not much to talk about after that. You have Detroit, Minnesota, and Kansas City. The only one with a winning record is Chicago. I think this is a pretty easy division to predict here, but we're going to go through all of it. Vince, let's start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying this. Minnesota Twins, most disappointing team in baseball this year. I don't think it's close. Even if the Yankees didn't make the playoffs, even if the Braves, for some reason, don't make the playoffs, I'd still feel that way. You just can't be 14 games under 500 and be a potential division winner in the preseason. And that's what that's how you define the Twins. So I'll start with that. That kind of defines the AL Central too. The Indians were that other sexy team who could have challenged the White Sox. They're now under 500. I'm putting the hex on this one. I did it last year with the Central teams across the board. I said, look, the AL Central and AL Central doesn't matter who wins them. They're terrible teams. They're not good divisions. And sure enough, not a single victory from either Central division last year in that shorter sample size. This one, we have a much larger one. White Sox are going to win it. That's obvious. But the AL Central now only, I'm saying, I don't take them seriously. I'm sorry. They have not convincingly beaten a single great team this year. And the Yankees took 5 out of 6, and both times were pretty depleted. So it's, and the Yankees aren't even the best team in their own division. So I don't take the White Sox seriously. I like them. I like watching them play. I think they're a good product. But I don't see them they've shown me no reason to think they can go any further than winning this division, unfortunately. So I'll add that disclaimer, but yeah, the White Sox are going to win the division.
Henry?
I think you can just hit Command C and Command V across the board for the White Sox here. But yeah, I will say the White Sox and Yankee series was pretty entertaining. The Field of Dreams game was just a home run, pun intended, from beginning to end. And the Yankees was one Tim Anderson, probably best play of his career to date, swing away from sweeping the White Sox again. And I don't watch the White Sox as much as I watch the Yankees. When I do, you have those big names and those young, exciting players, but there's a lot of, from watching them up close, there's a lot of holes in that team game, and I'm not sure that they're ready to hang with some of the other teams in the playoffs. So I'm going to pick them to win the division, but like Vince, I'm not necessarily sure they're going to be that juggernaut in the playoffs that I probably thought they would.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the main problem is their depth. After Tim Anderson, after Jose Abreu, after all these guys, and they've had all these guys hurt, and after that, they really don't have anybody like the Yankees that can step up and take it over and carry that team until their stars come back. Once they're gone, they're gone. That's it. So, and the fact that they can't perform with teams under 500 or with teams over 500, that is a problem, because everybody that's going to be in the playoffs is going to be over 500. So,
yeah. You bring up an interesting point, Austin. We were talking about farm systems. the White Sox elite guys have absolutely panned out. I'm a big Eloy guy, Robert. Those guys are studs. So there's no getting around it. Watching them play, you're fearful every time Jimenez is in the box. He's going to kill the ball. Those secondary prospects that we talked about, as a complement to the Yankees farm system, have really not panned out for the White Sox hitting wise. They've gotten, Garrett Crochet great out of the bullpen. They've got a few relievers there who maybe have panned out, but those hitters have not. You're right. They don't have the depth. And even in the lineup right now, Grandal is obviously out. He'll be back. He's a lot better than Zach Collins, but even the depth of that White Sox lineup, you're still probably a hitter short, which I didn't expect. This team is so known for their offense. You expect it to be this juggernaut lineup, and it's like, yeah, they pretty much pressured the Yankees the entire series offensively, but they could disappear for periods of a time in a game, and the lineup's not that deep at the back of it. Rotation, I know they've got the best pitching in the AL statistically, but the rotation doesn't have a Garrett Cole. It doesn't have a Chris Sale when he's healthy. It doesn't have that guy to me. Rodon's had a great year, but this is his first full year in years. I don't know what he's going to have in the playoffs, and that bullpen is fantastic, I think. And this is the one path the White Sox have to me. If Tony La Russa goes back to his vintage roots with the Cardinals and A's and just leans on those relievers to make up for the starters, and he can do it. He's a very crafty guy like that. They've got a chance to kind of mix and match their way into good enough pitching where if the hitting does struggle for a game or two, they can make a run. But I don't think they will. I picked them for the wild card before the season started because usually, unless you're the Chicago Cubs, that second year a team arrives usually as a step back. And in my mind, the White Sox probably arrived last year. This year, I expected them to take a little bit of a step back. And really, the reality is they haven't really taken a step back, but they also haven't taken that step forward. And that's kind of how I see them.
Right. I will tell you that bullpen was supposed to be the big bad wolf, and the Yankees touched up every big arm in every big spot of that bullpen this weekend.
Yeah, Liam Hendricks is garbage, man. I know he closed out the All-Star game, but geez, he got touched up. Kimbrough got touched. Every big arm they threw at us at every big spot got touched up, and those players remember that come playoff time. Crochet and Kopech to me were in probably because they're both might be starters in the future, but they were the most impressive arms out of that bullpen, and they weren't used in high leverage situations.
A couple of thousand fans in West Bubblefuck with a shitload of cornfields isn't the same as 50,000 screaming fans in the Bronx. It's just not the same.
Absolutely true.
No, yeah, it isn't the same. So I'm of the same opinion. They're going to win the division, but I think they'll be out in the first round because they won't be able to take it because everybody that's going in there is going to be above 500 and they don't have the depth. When you get in there, you need to have the depth everywhere. Pitching, hitting, you need to have the depth everywhere, and they don't have it really anywhere. So,
and not only that, you look at the wild card teams. I mean, every single team that's vying for a wild card spot, they can match up really well with the White Sox.
Yeah.
Yeah, and consider this. They are tied for the fourth best record in the AL. So, I mean, you look at it that way. They're running away with the Central. They're 10 games up. They've got a good record. But if you couple the fact that they're playing mostly crappy teams in the Central, they're beating up on their own division. And then you add to the fact that even then they have the Rays have a better record, the Astros have a better record, the A's have the same record, and then and Boston's still better than them. They'd be third or fourth in the AL East. That's really how I see it. It's not being biased. That's just how it is. And if they were playing those AL East teams all year round, who knows? They could be fourth. They could be closer to 500. So I have no reason to think they're going to beat juggernauts.
To Austin's point, they're 16-21 against teams over 500. That's not good.
That's not going to cut it. We've seen miracles happen before, but there's nothing that indicates to me this team's ready to make an ALCS and certainly not win an ALCS.
No. First of all, just to give you an idea of how shitty of the quality of teams that they're playing, you look at their record against teams over 500 at 16-21. The number of games that they've played against teams over 500, it's significantly lower than the other teams that are leading their divisions or competing in their divisions. Just the sheer number of games of teams that have played over 500.
Yep.
Yeah.
So speaking of comparing them against the AL East, we're going to move to the AL East. And when you look at the White Sox, if they were in the AL East as of right now, they would be, looks like second, pretty close to third. Yeah, and they would be right up there with Boston. They'd be right in between Boston and New York. So
third with the Yankees chasing their ass, who just kicked their ass.
Yeah, it would be really close. So let's move to the AL East. The AL East is very competitive. Unlike the AL Central, we got 4 teams over 500 and really 4 teams that are chasing for a playoff spot. You have Tampa Bay leading the way at 71-47, 3 games ahead of Boston. And then the Yankees are 5.5 games out of first, and Toronto is 7.5 games out of first. And then Baltimore is tanking once again, 32 games behind. So this should be a very, very interesting division all the way up to the end. I think I'll start with this one. I'm going to stick with, I think Tampa Bay wins the division, but it'll be very, very close between Tampa and New York. I think Boston has kind of run its course, and I think they showed up probably a year early. So I think, like I said, Tampa is going to win, but it'll be very, very close between Tampa and New York. Vince, what do you got to say about the AL East?
I actually agree with all of your reasoning. I also agree. I think the Rays will hang on. Henry brought up good points, and they're all perfectly valid. That he, there's no reason to think that the Rays are going to hold on to first. They're totally, they're banged up. They don't have the depth they had. They basically have no rotation at this point. But I have no reason to doubt their kind of magic that they have. Here's my concern with the Yankees. And I do think that the Yankees will make the playoffs at this point. I don't think they're going to win the division. And my concern is that Boston, I actually think, may not disappear. And this is not a standpoint that I had if you asked me like a week ago. They did just sweep Baltimore for what that's worth, which is not much. They always do that. But you look at Boston's schedule, the rest of this month, and really it's not that much harder in September. Their schedule alone, this is a team that could still beat bad teams. Their schedule alone might keep them afloat. Maybe not ahead of the Yankees, 2.5 games there. Obviously, they're about to play. That could change things if the Yankees actually win that series. But Boston's schedule might keep them afloat, even with the pitching. Maybe Chris Sale looked okay. Everyone making a big deal out of 6 innings, 2 runs against the Orioles. I don't know if that's a lot to write home about.
Yeah, I thought it was decent. I didn't think it was great, but I thought it was
decent. 8 strikeouts, fine, but it's the Orioles. And I think Boston scored like 300 runs that game, so you're not pitching on much, not a lot of stress pitches that game. But, Boston could win the division just based on that. I do agree with you, though. They're a year early. They have shown tremendous signs of regression, especially with the pitching. And their hitters really haven't done great against good pitching teams. But there's not a lot of those left on their schedule except for within the division. And a big part of that within the division is the Rays. So to me, you're either picking the Rays to beat up on Boston and knock them out, or you're picking Boston to stay afloat if you think the Rays are going to fall apart. It's really hard to pick against both and pick the Yankees. So that's kind of what my conundrum is. I think the Rays will hold on. They've got a 3-game lead over Boston, who I don't trust that much. 5.5 over the Yankees, which is kind of large. So I'm sticking with Tampa basically in a math equation is what I'm saying.
Yeah, Tampa is that thorn in your side. Boston is either they suck or they're really good. So it's really weird to see that they've been really good and now they're kind of falling off. Usually when they're really good, they're really good. But Tampa lately has been that thorn in the side, much like Oakland is the thorn in the side that really you can't never get away from them, and you don't know why they're so good, but they stay up top. So, there's that. Henry, what do you think about the AL East?
Before I continue, you see my background and how dark it got in less than 30 minutes?
Yeah.
This is why I will never move to upstate New York. It sounds like I'm in a Brazilian rainforest. I'm probably going to get killed by someone participating in the purge at any moment. This is why I will never move upstate.
For those of you that don't know, Henry right now is in the Catskills. Right now it is pitch dark where he's at. So
Yeah, there's no black screen. This is literally the background.
That is
But
wild.
and when you guys saw how bright it was when we started.
Yeah.
But I'm actually going to give Tampa Bay the respect that they deserve here. You know, they're running on fumes, but you know they've earned this respect. They've been there all year. They did it the year before. They did it the year before that, and they found a way to make it work. And that's what they do. You know, if it comes down to a close matchup, I like Kevin Cash more than I like Aaron Boone. You know, that'll gain you a game or two. I'm going to give Tampa Bay the respect that they deserve and say that they probably win the division here.
all right, so yet another unanimous decision. We've had 2 unanimous decisions. Now we've done the division winners for the AL. We're going to move to the NL now. Let's move to the competitive NL West. So this one is a very interesting division as well. Right now you have San Francisco, who's gotten a bit of a lead right now, playing like the best team in baseball. They haven't gone away yet, which I didn't see coming. San Francisco is 4 games ahead of the Dodgers, and then they're 10 games ahead of San Diego. So very much so at the beginning of the year, you thought there were going to be 3 playoff teams coming out of or 2 playoff teams coming out of the NL West with the Dodgers and the Padres, and then the Giants came out of nowhere. So then it started to become the idea that 3 playoff teams were going to come out of the NL West. Now San Diego has seemed to fallen out a bit and is tapering off. But Tatis came back, and, I mean, he came back, played the outfield. Kudos to him, and he hit 2 homers with that shoulder problem, whatever he's got. I still don't see him lasting throughout the whole season. He'll probably hurt it again because he doesn't have surgery with it. But, I mean, it's really hard to bet against the Giants right now. But the Dodgers are the Dodgers. They're a juggernaut. So, I mean, Henry, what do you think about the NL West right now?
You asked me last year. If you asked me the year before the season started, there's no way we're even having this discussion, right? It's a 2-team race, and you know, I think I had 2 of them pegged for 100 wins this year, and lo and behold, the Giants are winning the division. Giants have been ahead in the division most of the year. You know, they've done a good job at the trade deadline. They're scoring runs. Their pitching is keeping teams down. They're clutch against teams over 500. They're killing it at home. They're 40-18. You know what? I think the nicer story is the Giants, you know, winning this division. No one saw it coming. I'm going to say they hold off.
All right. I'm going to put San Francisco on there. Vince, what are your opinions on the NL West?
Yeah, it's come down to schedules for me just because the Giants have been so shocking. You know, we tend to, as fans, focus on the bad, right? The Yankees were surprisingly bad for the whole first half of the season. The Twins are a disappointment. The Braves are a disappointment. The Mets and Padres now are a disappointment. But we don't really focus on teams like the Giants all that often until they do the job. And one of those reasons is because it's so shocking what they're doing. You want to talk about the Red Sox being a year early. The Giants might be 2 or 3 years early based on the way that they were supposed to be rebuilding. They never really rebuilt either. They kind of pulled the Yankees, right? The Yankees rebuilt for 2 months. They went from the oldest team in the majors to all of a sudden having this World Series caliber core. The Giants maybe have done it in even more impressive fashion because they're a juggernaut in what was going to be the toughest division in baseball. I don't think you can say that now, but yeah, I mean, the Padres have probably had the season the Giants were supposed to have. If you looked in April, you know, Giants got off to a hot start. You're like, all right, well, they're off to a hot start. Run differential's not as good as Padres and Dodgers. They're going to probably taper off, but it was a nice run. They have something to build on. And the Padres did that instead. And they're the ones who are in third. They're the ones who are 10 games out. They're the ones who ran into some injury problems. And I agree with you, Austin. Tatis's injury really, really concerns me. And Henry can tell you I'm like something of an injury truther. Totally predicted DeGrom, by the way, kind of offhand, that he was going to start to run into the issues. But yeah, I mean,
those are for other reasons, though.
Yeah, right. You just like my reason was, hey, he's in his 30s. Like shit's going to start to happen. That's what happens. I'm in my 30s. I know how that goes. I didn't think he'd like blow out his shoulder or whatever he's going through, but yeah, the Giants, I think I have, again, this is sort of like what I said with Houston. I just have no reason to pick against them, but I'm going to. I'm going to take that risk. Dodgers are 4 games back. I looked at the Dodgers schedule. It's really, really pretty easy. And I have to be different somewhere, and it just makes the most sense. Like Henry and I said, I picked the Dodgers to win 110 games this year. Now, they did run into a lot of injuries. So they did run into the Trevor Bauer situation, which no one could have seen coming, no pun intended. But I'm picking the Dodgers. I mean, that team looks like it's finally a little complete now. It looks like that schedule's in their favor. They maybe don't have to worry about the Padres at this point being 6 games ahead of them. Padres, I don't trust Tatis to last, like you said. So I'm going with the Dodgers, but there's nothing that would surprise me if the Giants win this division because every step of the way, Austin, every single month, I'm like, well, they've had a nice run, but you expect it to stop, and it hasn't. So can they win the division? Absolutely. Should they? Probably at this point, but I'm going to pick the Dodgers. I think that the Dodgers are capable of having like a 40-8 type of run, which they've had in these last few years. So, I'm banking on that basically.
Yeah, so I'm torn because I've said on the podcast before, I had a whole episode on the Giants, the enigma that was the Giants. And you're getting your best offensive production from two people that are really in the twilight of their career, in Brandon Crawford and Buster Posey, and you're getting your supplementary players that are really playing below average. They're not, great hitters. And then you have the oldest pitching staff in baseball. This team is not supposed to be winning. So I don't understand how they continue to win. And I said before, the Giants will taper off, then it'll turn into a Dodgers versus Padres, and then they just kept winning. So, it might be a little bit of wishful, hopeful thinking, but I'm going to predict that the Giants, they stick in there and they win this. Now, do I think they're going to win the division? I think they have a great chance to win the division. Do I think they're going to really make any sort of mark and win the or go to the World Series and win the World Series? No, I think they're going to run into some buzzsaw teams and I don't think they're going to do very well in the postseason, but I'm going to have them winning the division, and it'll be a really nice story to cover, on Dong City and Roundtrippers, and we'll all get to talk about it. So I'm just going to pull for the story here and say that the Giants are going to win the division.
Yeah, so, I agree. The Giants would be a better story for sure.
Oh, for sure. Let's move to the NL Central. So the NL Central really is boring, I guess. It's really boring when you look at it. Milwaukee has a very firm lead over Cincinnati. They have an 8-game lead, and then Cincinnati, and then there's St. Louis at 10 games back, and then Chicago is Chicago. They've tanked, although they have a really bright future. So again, Cub fans, stop whining and crying. This is what a rebuild is for. And
impossible for Cub fans.
Pittsburgh, and we're not even going to talk about Pittsburgh. So let's get down to this. I think this is going to be another one. Both Central divisions seem to be easy to predict, but Henry, what do you think about the NL Central?
It's the boring Brewers, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
There's just so many boring reasons to get into, but it doesn't make sense because it's so boring. It's like just like Milwaukee, just like St. Louis. The towns are boring. The teams are boring. The management is boring. Everything about them is boring. Milwaukee, they're a good run baseball team. Christian Yelich, I think we're still trying to figure out what he is. He goes from MVP to just disappearing. He's doing the Mookie Betts, the every other year thing. It's Milwaukee, and that's it.
What do you think their chances are going deep into the playoffs?
I mean, you look at everyone else, and you're like, they're not going to go deep, but they always find themselves at least winning round one. So, I mean, every team in the NL West is better than them. I mean, maybe they can beat a team in the NL East. If they get a matchup against a team in the NL East, I can see them advancing.
Okay. All right. Vince, what do you think?
Yeah, so first of all, absolutely right. I mean, this is always the most boring division, except that one year that the Pirates were like won 98 games, and then they just got screwed by MLB's insistence on not reseeding for any reason. But anyway, tangent there. It's going to be the Brewers, and the reason is exactly. Henry and I actually spent some time on this. We had Melvin, another member of Baseball Life, on when we did this, and when we did the division predictions. The Brewers are like the Rays light to me. They have a system in the regular season. They have a front office that stays loyal to that system. That system is preventing runs. They don't always do it with a classic, trio of aces. But they have a way. They intertwine their bullpen and rotation well. They have a couple of studs at the top of that rotation who can just shut you down any given day. And then the offense does its job. I mean, the Brewers have historically had some thumpers, but they're not a particularly great offensive team to me. And they're not in a great division. I mean, like Henry said, both geographically and baseball-wise, Central's just so boring. I mean, I've been to most of those stadiums too, and I'll actually be going to Milwaukee next month. It's just it's a really boring area of the world. But yeah, I mean, Brewers are going to win this division. They've got the division lead to show it. They know how to win in the regular season. As far as where they go in the playoffs, it's a little more interesting than usual, only because that the NL West is going to get the top seed, right? So they're going to play the wild card, which will also be the NL West, almost no matter how you slice it, because I think the Padres will end up playing the second place team. So you're going to consolidate 3 West teams down to 1 by the time you get to the NLCS, again, because MLB has no idea what they're doing as far as marketing the playoffs correctly. So what you're going to end up with is Brewers versus Braves, probably, or Phillies. Either way, it doesn't really matter. And in that case, now you're talking about the Phillies, who have 0 playoff experience against a team who's repeatedly been in it in recent memory, or the Braves, who are like the biggest choking team in the history of the world in the NL. So in my mind, I think the Brewers have a good shot at the NLCS by default, even if I don't think they're that great of a team, and that pitching is built for a short series. So I think this is one of those things where they might win in 5 games in the NLDS, and then they'll lose in 5 games in the NLCS. Would not shock me at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have Milwaukee. I mean, Milwaukee's going to win this division. There isn't anybody that's going to challenge them. I mean, Joey Votto's been on a tear, but the rest of Cincinnati is not. So, I mean, they're going to run away with the division. They've got the pitching to go into the series. They've got, Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff and Freddie Peralta and those guys, but I think they're kind of like the Mets light, except they keep winning because they have great pitching, but they don't have any offense and they can't give their pitching run support. So, yes, pitching does win championships, but you also got to score enough runs. So if you're not scoring runs, you're not winning any games. So I think I agree with you guys. I think they will advance 1 round, but I think they won't get past the championship series once they run into the Dodgers or somebody like that.
Anyone in the West, like Henry said, they wouldn't beat anyone in the West, and by default they're going to face one in the NLCS. So
yeah. So with our final predictions for the division winners, we're going to go to the NL East. The NL East has become very weird in the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so.
Train wreck.
Yeah, it's an absolute train wreck. All of a sudden the New York Mets have just fallen off the wagon here. They're, Jacob deGrom is nowhere to be found. You've got Noah Syndergaard, who, where he is, nobody knows where he's at. And, you've a makeshift pitching staff that was good at the beginning, but now is no longer in any existence. And you still don't have an offense that can produce anything. Javier Baez was not the get that you were supposed to. He strikes out a lot, so he wasn't going to improve the offense any. So you have a low-scoring offense and a terrible and patchwork pitching staff. So they fall into third after leading the division for most of the time. Right now you have the Atlanta Braves in first and the Philadelphia Phillies on the strength of a quietly very good MVP season by Bryce Harper. They're a game behind, and then the Mets are 2.5 games behind. And then Miami is 11 games behind, and Washington is in the middle of their rebuild at 12 games behind. So let's talk about this NL East a little bit. Henry, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I think this division is an enigma. I will give the Mets pitching staff a little more credit than you there. I think that pitching staff is the only reason that they're still in it at this point. The Mets pitching staff has actually allowed the least number of runs in that entire division. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Yeah. It's crazy because the Braves are in first, right? The Braves have allowed 503 runs. They're the only division leader in all of baseball that has allowed more than 500 runs scored. Now, you look at the Mets, like I said, the only reason they're in it is because of their pitching. The Mets have only allowed 468 runs scored, but they've only scored 443. So they can't score for anything. And that's, you have guys like Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor who's disappeared all season. The Mets, I just, the rest of their schedule and their injuries, they're just a giant question mark. If they could get healthy fast, they could be dangerous. But I with that schedule they have, I think the Mets are about as good as done, which sucks because I think I had them going to the World Series in my prediction show. I'm going to go with the Phillies here. I think I like the Phillies coming on late and stealing that division. I'm not impressed with anyone in this division, and I think whatever team comes out on top is just primed for a first-round upset, no matter who they face.
All right. Vince, go ahead.
Yeah, it was well said. The Mets again. I mean, this, you can spin it however you want. This was a really disappointing season if the Mets don't make the wild card. In my mind, you stole the show in the offseason. You had the new ownership, all of the goodwill to this franchise, which has just not had a lot of goodwill really this century. And now all of a sudden you're looking, and this is a team that legitimately could fall under 500. It's surprised. I would not have expected that, no matter what was going to go wrong. Every team has injuries. Mets have had their share for sure. I just wouldn't have expected their floor, and I should have, because they're the Mets, right? Like, just historically, you expect it's going to be so much worse than you think it is. Yeah. But I didn't. I really thought they were turning a corner. The new ownership was going to be juju. Instead, another psychological lesson here. Henry and I very privately have talked about the power of the trade deadline. Even if you don't get guys who make major impacts, just going for it in the right way can catapult a team mentally. You're seeing it with the Yankees. Like I said, Anthony Rizzo, fantastic for a week. He's now hurt. Joey Gallo did nothing until this past week. The Yankee and Haney's been terrible. So the main guys that the Yankees got at that deadline really haven't made a major impact, but just the psychology of going for it can sometimes make a team get really hot. I think you're seeing that with the Braves and Phillies. I think that they both decided we're not going to fold. This division's winnable. Even after Acuna goes down for the Braves, the Phillies have kind of just neither been here nor there. I think either one of it's a total toss-up to me, by the way, as far as Braves Phillies, but I do think it's between those two. I don't think the Mets have any shot. I want the Phillies to win really badly because I love Joe Girardi, and I don't think he nearly gets the credit he deserves. He had just a historically terrible bullpen. And he has made it work now. He's got some reinforcements. They have pretty good rotation. I don't think it gets talked about enough, the front of that rotation, what it's capable of. I'm rooting for the Phillies. I think I'm going to stick with the Braves, just metrics-wise. They've got the bats. Even without Acuna, Austin Riley has kind of been carrying the torch very quietly over there. Freddie Freeman's been an MVP since like May. I'm going to stick with the Braves just based on experience, based on offense usually is what carries you in the regular season more so than anything, unless you're the Brewers or Rays. So I'll lean Braves, but if the Phillies, it's a toss-up. I mean, Phillies win, they're only a game out. It doesn't surprise me, and I'm rooting for them. But I'll pick the Braves, and the one team I'm sure about is the Mets are not going to win that division.
I just have a note real quick. I'm sorry, guys. Something I want to say about the NL East. The only division that every single team is sub 500 against teams over 500. The only division.
That is a good stat.
That is
the other. Yeah. The other wonderful thing is Gabe Kapler in San Francisco, Joe Girardi, probably the two leading vote-getters for Manager of the Year. Both guys run out of where they were, one replacing the other one. And it's going to probably come down to those two guys for manager of the year. That should be fun.
Right. Yeah. So this division, like I said, is very weird the last 2 weeks. And I didn't have Atlanta going to the playoffs because they didn't seem like they had the firepower. And now they're leading the division and they're in position to make the playoffs. But the Phillies are, I'm not going to say they're really good, but they're quietly starting to put it together. Like I said, Bryce Harper has had a very quietly good season. And, you know, he could be in the conversation for MVP when it's all said and done. And you're looking at quietly, they had a good trade deadline in acquiring Kyle Gibson and Ian Kennedy to solidify the back end of that bullpen and just gain another starter, you know, to couple with, you know, Aaron Nola has good starts. He's kind of inconsistent right now, but Zach Wheeler, you know, has been doing very well. You know, this one is a toss-up for me. I think with the fact that Atlanta has that experience of pushing down or making that playoff push and knowing how to execute that, I'm going to have Atlanta squeaking out Philadelphia just because, you know, not even Bryce Harper has playoff. The only one that has playoff experience is Joe Girardi, but he can't go out there and play. So, you know, I really think that Atlanta is going to squeak it out against Philadelphia. But, you know, like you said, Vince, I'm not going to be upset if, you know, Philadelphia wins it. And that might make a case for Bryce Harper being the NL MVP this year if that happens.
You know, I'm thinking about it now. You could potentially run into a situation where Philly has the manager of the year, the rookie of the year, and the Cy Young.
You could.
And furthermore, I was thinking about it, Henry. Has any manager ever won manager of the year for two teams in the same division?
I don't know, but this would also be his third manager of the year with third different team.
Yeah.
I'm kind of rooting for it now that it's coming, you know, putting it out there.
So another one is going to be a really good story if they win.
Yeah,
he's doing it with former Yankees. He's got a ton of former Yankees on that team.
And honestly, I think the Phillies are the more complete team. I think they're a better team than the Braves are. I just think that the Braves are better where you need to be better, if that makes sense. Like
they have
the Phillies
talent. They have better talent.
Right. They've got the higher ceiling, and I guess that's really what I'm basing it. You know, when you're in a division race and you've got 6 weeks left, you know, that's what I'm basing it on. So.
All right, so we are going to move really quickly. Let's move to the wild card before we go to last call. So the AL wild card race is pretty tight between, looks like 5 teams here right now. Oakland and Boston are ahead, or they have the spots right now if the season were to end today. New York is 2.5 games behind. Toronto is 4.5 games behind. And then you have Seattle still hanging on in the picture with 5.5 games behind. Let's go ahead and start with Vince. Who do you think is going to capture the AL wildcard spots?
Yeah, well, I mean, I already kind of backed myself in the corner. I said I think the Yankees make the playoffs, and I picked the Rays to win the division. So it's by default. I think they're one of the playoff teams. But it comes down to the fact that I'll start with this. I don't think Seattle will. I can safely rule them out. If you're going to pick someone in the West, it's going to be either the A's or Astros. Seattle's not on that tier. But then I look at it and I say, okay, well, Seattle is still in it. They may still stay in it. All of a sudden, that West is not like you just pick them because it's the easier division to rack up wins against. If the Yankees are going to be the second wild card, which I think they will be, I think the first wild card is going to be Toronto. They scare me. Like Henry said, they scare me more than the Red Sox do. They scare me more than the A's do. The A's have shown a penchant. Though they hang around, they also can collapse. You know, we've seen that before. Obviously different players, but it wouldn't shock me. And I just think the Yankees have to catch Boston or Oakland to make the playoffs. In this case, I think that they're going to catch both because I think the Blue Jays will end up with the other wild card spot. So I'll go Yankees, Blue Jays, but that's outside of the Mariners. Any of those 4 teams can make the playoffs, and it wouldn't surprise me at all.
That was shocking. I didn't think you would pick the Yankees and the Blue Jays. So
And the Blue Jays are so weird too, right? Like they should have, at some point, they should have won like 18 out of 20 games in my mind. You look at that offense, you look at, they got Barrios now, so their rotation isn't completely overachieving at this point. The bullpen has some arms. You just would think they're going to club their way to a super, super hot streak. And I think they did have like a 10-game run. And then they got swept or they lost 3 out of 4 to the Mariners, whatever it was. So it's just they're very, very inconsistent for what their talent level is. And they're young. But yeah, they scare me for whatever reason. Now, I'm going to add this caveat. I like to hedge things. COVID could really screw up the Blue Jays. So I don't know what that means necessarily, but that could really screw with things. And in that case, I would pick Oakland to be the other wild card.
Okay. All right. Henry.
Prepared to be shocked because I had the same too, but I have the Yankees getting the first spot and the Blue Jays getting the second. I mean,
wow.
The Blue Jays are a dangerous team, man. I see them up close. That team is dangerous. They have good managing, and they have the AL MVP. I don't care who ends up with the trophy. Vlad is the AL MVP. I'm going to go with the Yankees and Blue Jays in that order.
All right. Those are interesting picks. I did not see that coming. I mean, the Blue Jays, they have a really young hitting core and a pretty good pitching staff. You know who I like is really underrated, I think, is Alek Manoah. I think that dude has got really good movement on his slider. He locates it really well. And, I mean, is it Alex or Alec?
No, you said it right the first time.
Okay,
Alex, right?
Yeah, Alek Manoah. I mean, he's got a really good slider, and I've watched him pitch a couple times, and that dude is filthy. So I think he's a very good bullpen or starting rotation option on top of Barrios. And is Hyunjin Kim doing anything this year? I haven't really heard anything about him this year. So I mean, they have the pieces. I agree that I think the Yankees are going to make the playoffs. I think they will, club their way to kind of steal it from Vince there, but use it for the Yankees. I think they're going to club their way into a playoff run. But I don't see I see the Blue Jays just squeaking just out of it. They'll pass Boston, but just out of it. And I have Oakland making it as the other wild card. They're a lot like the Rays. They're a thorn in the side. They may not necessarily go very far, but they will. I think they'll make the playoffs, and they know how to make it there, whether it's on the wild card or winning the division. So, I agree with the Yankees, but I'm going to put Oakland down as the second wild card.
I would guess, Austin, and I don't have any proof of this whatsoever. I would guess if you looked at the Vegas odds right now, you're probably right. I would just assume Yankees and A's probably have the highest percentage chance of any of the wild cards.
Yeah.
Just a hunch.
Well, probably because also Oakland they have the better record right now.
Yeah, well, they are the top wild card right now,
yeah.
So that makes sense. And yeah, it is ballsy to pick 2 AL East teams just because there's 4 of them that are fighting each other right now, and there's a lot of divisional games left. But I just think that cream rises to the top in this case. And not that Oakland's a bad team. I just think that the Jays are scary, and the Yankees are probably playing the best baseball out of any of the teams involved.
Right.
I'm the only one with Houston not making the playoffs.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that. God, man, that would just be the greatest thing ever. But yeah, I didn't even realize that. You're picking Houston to be out of it entirely, which I should point out, I believe means Blue Jays are going to make up like 6 games on them. Does that sound right?
Something like that, a considerable difference. That would be very interesting to see if they just tank like that. That would be really interesting to see.
Yeah, here's to hoping that happens. 7 games.
Let's move really quickly to the NL wildcard race. So right now it is held up by 2 NL West teams. The Dodgers are the top wildcard getters by 6 games, and then San Diego is next, but 2.5 games behind that is Cincinnati. You have St. Louis at 4.5 games back, Philadelphia at 5 games back, And then I think the Mets are pretty much out of it. They're 6.5 games back. But right now it's looking like the NL West is going to take both wild card spots. But do you think Cincinnati or St. Louis is going to come back and take one away from San Diego? Vince, we'll start with you.
So, preface it by saying the Reds are my favorite NL team. I've made no secret of that. Effective 2019, they are my favorite NL team. That said, I think the Padres will hang on. They look terrible right now, and they've got a lot of injuries, and I get all that. And they're in a tougher division, which also makes things tougher. But I do I would just be shocked. Like in a vacuum, I would be shocked if the Padres didn't make the playoffs. So you just look at the whole season, would be shocking to me. And my problem with the Reds, and the reason I'm not a believer, despite that they have a lot of variables in their favor, it's just they haven't been consistent since like 2001. So I don't know. There's nothing that indicates to me that they are going to be able to make that leap when the going gets tough in September over the Padres. And the Cardinals, I was shocked how close they are. Like, they're really not that far out.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah, they have that pedigree where they'd be that annoying, boring-ass team that just takes a playoff spot from someone who would be otherwise exciting. But I'm still not going to pick them, though. I think the Reds are the class of the NL besides the NL Central, besides the Brewers, but I'm going to stick with the Padres here.
Okay, so that's a pick for the Dodgers and Padres. Henry, what do you think?
It'd be Giants and Padres because I think the Dodgers win the division.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It would be Giants and Padres.
Yeah, and the Giants are given, so that's my other pick.
Yeah. Okay.
I think St. Louis is hotter than we're giving them credit for, but they're also boring as hell. And I don't think that baseball on a national stage wants to see two teams from the NL Central. So I'm going to go with the Dodgers and the Padres in that order, making the two wild card teams. Making that, by the way, 2 divisions in the league having 3 teams in.
Yeah, the AL East and the NL West would both have it. So
plus, I mean, let's be real, MLB needs and wants Fernando Tatis on the national stage. If there's 2 guys that they want, it's Shohei Ohtani, who they've spent, I think, every marketing dollar they have on pushing this season. I mean, I saw an MLB post where they're like, oh, Shohei does it again, another quality start. And I'm like, this is what we're doing? Like, we're celebrating quality starts now? But, you know, the marketing hype is behind Ohtani, and it's also behind Tatis. And they need Tatis on the national stage. They just need that faith. They need that energy. They need that exuberance to piss off all the boomers and to make all the millennials extremely happy.
They need it, but will he make it there is the thing. Will his shoulder last?
Look, the guy's athletic. If they're in on it, he's going to play, man. That's another reason I hate Upstate. All these fucking bugs. Sorry, this is giant-ass bug just flew on the screen.
By the way, I was also going to shit on Austin's Angels there just by saying that we can't have the NL Trout also just never make the postseason. So they really do need Tatis to make it over there so they could start that, you know, narrative going forward that he's like a playoff contender.
Yeah, I mean, they need one of the best players in the MLB to make it. Like, it's so frustrating as an Angel fan to know that you have one of the best generational baseball players of this generation in Mike Trout, and he's still only had 1 playoff series, and they didn't do very well. So, you know.
I mean, if you look at our you know, all of our collective playoff teams, I mean, there's a lot of young stars that this game can market. You know, you have the Aaron Judges, you know, the Nestor Cortezes of the world, you know, the Fernando Tatis, the Mookie Betts. You know, there's a lot of young star power on these teams that they want, and you want Bryce Harper on the national stage. Bryce Harper's become an underrated baseball player from where he was once an overrated baseball player, and he's not getting enough love in what he's doing in his career. He's underpaid. Dare I say it, the man's underpaid. So yeah. I want to see a guy like Bryce in the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Bryce Harper now is underrated. I used to not like Bryce Harper. I used to think he's overrated. He's got too much of an attitude, but he seems to have calmed down, and he actually performs pretty well. And
Bryce Harper is awesome.
So
you know what happened with Bryce Harper, and I don't know how we got here. It's you couldn't talk about Bryce Harper without comparing him to Mike Trout. And the minute
No.
you did that, Trout is a better player. We all know Trout's a better player.
Right.
But anytime you brought up Harper, Trout had to be brought up. And that kind of just diminished him. It's Manning and Brady. It's Agassi and Sampras. You bring one up and the other guy's right behind. And I think Trout's image has suffered because of that. Harper's opinion.
Right. All right, so really quickly, I'm going to do my predictions. I mean, it's no question that the Dodgers are going to make it, even though I have the Giants winning the West. I mean, the Dodgers are going to make it. And looking at these teams that are chasing the Padres, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Philadelphia, I don't really see any of these teams, even though San Diego's terrible now that they have Tatis back, I don't really see any of these teams getting over the hump. I think they're equally as troublesome as San Diego is right now. So I'm going to go with Dodgers and Padres, but I don't think the Padres are going to go as far as everybody thought they were going to go. I think it'll be a very tough road for the Padres. So that rounds out our predictions. We will just have to see how that happens or how this transpires through the rest of the season. And we'll have to revisit this and see which one of us was right in which of these divisions. Henry's pointing to himself. All right, so let's go to our last calls. And so we are all going to tell a personal story about whatever about baseball. I know you guys were thinking about it. Do either of you have a preference? Which one of you want to start first on what your personal stories want to be?
I can guarantee you Henry's story is probably more exciting, so start with him.
It's more frustrating than exciting because you guys have known me long enough to know how much I absolutely love the World Baseball Classic.
Uh-huh.
I think it's one of the better things baseball has as a whole, and one of the better things that MLB has. It's the Olympics for baseball. You know, no one wants to see what we just saw, represent the USA. You want to see what we get with the WBC, where you get about as close to the absolute best players playing for their home country. And so I had tickets for my cousin dated a guy, and I forgot what his job was, but he would get these tickets to these meet and greets. And I met Bernie once, got an autograph ball. The next year was Tino. Tino was awesome, by the way, got an autograph ball. I got Beltran, and I needed like a wet napkin and like special pants to keep the wood down because you guys know how much I love Beltran. And then I met Carlos Delgado. And the same way I went to see Beltran, I went with Carlos Delgado. I had a WBC jersey on. I actually had his WBC jersey on. I had the Puerto Rico hat, spoke to him in native tongue, and he was such a dick. This guy was such a dick. The meet and greet comes with an autograph ball, and he's just like, the whole time he was just like pissed off and having to sign these autographs, and he just was not interactive. And this was the last of the 4 meet and greets that I did. So, Tino was awesome. Bernie was awesome. Beltran was amazing. He spoke to me in English and Spanish, cracked jokes. And then, Delgado is just like this big letdown and this big douchebag. He was with the Mets at the time. And I remember just thinking, like, I went home and I literally threw his jersey in the trash. Like, I didn't make it past, the trash that night at home. And it was just the biggest disappointment I had meeting a baseball player. And there's something that always stays with me. And it sucks because, New York has this fake rivalry between Yankees and Mets fans and stuff like that. And even when they don't say it, it's Yankee fans will secretly want the Mets to lose, and the Mets fans will not so secretly want the Yankees to lose. And, even though he was a Met, he was a countryman, and he was a guy that, I admired when he was with Toronto and, should go into the Hall of Fame, and was a Yankee eventually. And this guy was just such a piece of crap, man, to the fans. And just, it's something that will always stick with me and just turn me off so much. And so if you're a ball player, man, fans love that interaction. And you see 1,000 fans a day and you'll never remember them. But a fan will see you one time and will always remember that interaction. So just remember that, players.
Remember that, players, and remember, kids, if you become a famous baseball player, don't be an asshole. sucks because I've always kind of liked Carlos Delgado, and now that I know that he's a jerk, that really.
Dude, I loved him. And like I said, even though he played for the Mets, like every time he did something good, I'm like, oh, there's another Puerto Rican ball player doing something. Like, I really liked the dude. I mean, saw him in Toronto, and I was hugely disappointed, to say the least.
Bummer. All right, Vince, go ahead and tell your story.
Yeah, I was going to say, Henry's like the third or fourth different source I've heard that says Carlos Delgado is a dick, too. So I just, I'll co-sign just based on other sources that he is indeed an ass. I wanted to tell this story because it illustrates I was a terrible baseball player. Really good on defense, but that's like being a really good rebounder in basketball. Like it doesn't mean that much. But I was a terrible hitter, and at least once I turned like 11, I was just once guys could throw like 60, I was done. But I wanted to tell this story because it kind of illustrates me as a fan in that like Henry had mentioned earlier, he's more into the pitching stats, the pitching analytics than I am. I am by no means, by the way, an anti-analytics guy. I'm not like I believe scouts and I'm only eye test. Like it's not like that. I just am way more into, I think, a balanced approach of sometimes like just what I see. I don't care what the spin rate is or the exit velocity or the exit whatever. So and this is going to tie it in, and this is one of the reasons I hate Aaron Boone and the Yankees philosophy so much, is that my last game ever in organized baseball was in Babe Ruth. I was, I think, 14 years old, maybe turning 15 years old. And I was, like I said, a bad hitter, probably. I would bet if it was a 9-man lineup, which it wasn't, it was probably like 10 or 11. I was like the next to last hitter in the lineup. Like that was my spot. I could bunt, I could like steal bases, like do all the little stuff just so I was in a total zero. But I couldn't hit. And my last game of Little League, it's a playoff game, first round of the playoffs. We end up losing the game 12-0. Never forget that. We got mercy.
God.
Yeah, it was bad. And we weren't like a bad team either. It was like a 500 team playing a team that we probably could have hung with. I don't remember what we did in the regular season, but we lost 12-0 in like 5 innings. And I batted my first at bat. And I just remember it was the only time that year. And the previous year I had taken off, I like signed up too late. So I really hadn't had a good season in like 3 years. That first at bat, you just have those at bats sometimes when you're just like good things are about to happen. And I ripped 2 balls foul like to left field, and then I ended up grounding out. It was just one of those pitches that I just didn't ground it out to shortstop. And then the coach pulled me, and I'm a very, very mellow. I'm extremely competitive, but I'm very mellow on the outside when I'm competing. I was so angry that I got pulled, and it's like, how do you explain to your coach, like, hey, if you leave me in my next at bat, I guarantee you, like, I'm going to hit the ball really hard when I'm batting like 080 on the season probably. But that's exactly how I felt. Like that at bat, I was like, I had it figured out. The ball was like a beach ball to me. I happened to ground out. He probably would have pulled me either way. But I always think about that moment when I look at analytics, because it's like I could have been just terrible, but sometimes a guy throws your speed. Sometimes it's your day. Sometimes you're just there is a psychological part to this game that I think sometimes analytics eats up a little too much of. And I see that too much with the Yankees. They're willing to go to a guy who's like 3 for 4 against someone. And the other guy might be like 5 for 20. But they're going to go with a 3 for 4 guy. And I'm like, all right, well, the sample size here is pretty small in both cases. But the 5 for 20 guy might have hit 2 home runs like yesterday, and they'll still go with the other guy. And that's what drives me nuts about analytics, is that it's math to a fault. It just sometimes like other math can be used to spin it the other way, because that's kind of how statistics work. But I always think of that story. That's why I'll never be like fully like, okay, this is what the printout says, and that's exactly how Aaron Boone manages. It's just like whatever makes the most sense in this sample size they've chosen to take, that's what he goes with. And I always think about that last at bat. I'm like, if I had one more at bat, I probably would have ended my career with a hit. maybe we wouldn't have been shut out and things would have been a little bit better. But yeah, that was it. That was the story. I was a terrible hitter. I ended my career on a ground out to short, but I swear to God, if I had one more at bat, it would have at least been a fly out. So there you have it.
I always hate that though. You're like, you feel good at the plate, and then you know it doesn't pan out the way you thought it would, or you know you hit the ball really hard and it goes right to somebody, and you're like, come on, that was like the best contact I've made in the last 2 weeks. So
yeah.
I bet you Austin
for what it's worth.
Yeah, I bet you Austin didn't think he was gonna get 2 like bummer stories.
Yeah, there's our most depressing moments as related to baseball, Austin. Thanks for having us on.
So I'll tell mine. Mine's in my little league days, and I'm gonna tie it into why. Even though I talk some crap about the Yankees and I, contribute to that Yankees ruined baseball, whatever stuff, I do have a soft spot for the Yankees because growing up, my father was a Yankees fan. And when I played Little League, I was always the Yankees.
Man.
It never failed. Whenever I played Little League, I was on the Yankees. I was on the Yankees until I think I was like 15. So I always had the pinstripes on. And I always, because he was a Yankees fan, I watched Yankee games. And, Derek Jeter ended up, and it still is, my favorite player. And, I just, growing up playing on the Yankees and having my father as a Yankee fan, it's always given me that soft spot for the Yankees, even though I probably shouldn't have it, but I do. And I'm always secretly rooting for them to win and do well. So my Little League days, like I said, I was on the Yankees quite a bit, and I was actually a pretty, at least decent baseball player. In my Little League days, I think the last Little League season I hit like a 730 average or something like that. And I had like 57 stolen bases or something like that. I was not a home run hitting guy. I hit 2 home runs my entire career. Like the entire time I played baseball, I only ever hit 2 homers. So I guess you can call me like the D Gordon of Little League. I don't know what you want to call it. Billy Hamilton. I don't know. But, that was me. I was just a guy that was just going to get on base and be on third 2 pitches. So I was always good on the Yankees. And as soon as I got away from the Yankees, pretty much by the time I got to high school, it all fell apart for me. Whether it was politics or statistics wise or whatever, it all just fell apart. And I didn't have the right coaches, and I ended up not making it as a professional baseball player. I'm just sitting here talking about baseball. So, I'm not a professional baseball player. And it was always really interesting because I always look back to those Yankees days and I'm like, I wonder if it's because I had the Yankee uniform on that I did as good as I did as a little leaguer. So,
Yes, that's the answer. The answer is yes. That's what it was.
Put on the pinstripes, magic happens.
It's those pinstripes. That's what it is. So
ex Anthony Rizzo. Anthony Rizzo wants to retire a Yankee already.
Yeah,
that's what I've heard. So, I'll always be an Angel fan. It's going to take a lot for me not to be an Angel fan, but I have that soft spot for the Yankees because of my Little League days. So thank you, Dad.
Yeah.
But is it like 2 generational talents and no playoff appearances?
I was going to say that it's pretty evident it's going to take a lot for you not to be an Angels fan based on your last decade.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So I think that concludes our last call. Do you guys have any last remarks? Maybe you guys should just plug Dong City and let's get at it.
Yeah, sure.
Dong City every other Wednesday for now. Wednesday at Baseball Life. I just want to thank you for having us on and being a very vital part of our baseball community that we have. I love that you're doing the podcast for yourself. It's a wonderful thing, and just thanks for having us on, and wish you continued success.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments. Podcasts can be whatever you want them to be. I think people get caught up in them for the wrong reasons sometimes. but it's whatever, it's for me, it's therapeutic, it's cathartic. There's things that I bottle up all week watching the game that I know I want to talk about. It's why we talk about the Yankees probably so much. It's more for my own therapy for free. Yeah, I mean, I'm proud of you. I'm thank you for your contributions. I think you're doing a great job. It was really fun to be on here, and wish you the best of luck.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate baseball life because, and I've told a few people this, it's not very often that I get to talk about baseball the way we talk about baseball and baseball life, because most of the time when in the general public, when you talk about baseball the way we do, people think you're nuts, because, people just think you're crazy because you talk so in depth about baseball, and, the general public has no idea what you're talking about. So baseball life is a great place to talk about, whether you're a new fan or, you've been watching for 40 years, there's a place in baseball life for you. And I really, really appreciate that. And it's really that has really shown me my true love for baseball and why I started this podcast. So, I don't make any money right now off of this podcast. I just do it because it's fun. So, and much like what you guys do, I'm sure you guys do it because you love talking about baseball and it's fun. So, I really appreciate those sentiments, and listen to Dong City. They're on Spotify and probably anywhere else you listen to your podcast, and make your way over to the Baseball Life group. You're not going to regret it because they got some really great people there. All right.
Thank you, brother.
No problem, man. That concludes this episode of the Roundtrippers podcast, and coupled with Dong City. It sounds like they're going to have this as their Dong City episode. Am I incorrect in that?
No, it sounds like a plan.
All right.
Maybe
this week's Dong City.
A little bit longer of a trip. So
there you go. So you've listened to Roundtrippers and Dong City at the same time, and that concludes the episode. So until next time, guys, thank you and have a good day.
see ya.